Okay, so now we talked about pinning the arm. Okay, let's talk about passing the arm. So one of the positions one of my control positions from a situation in which I'm pinning the arm, I go to a single chest wrap, I go to far trap, I grab the arm, and I go into a figure four. Okay, this would be my end goal when it comes to actually passing the arm. Okay, so I want to land to this figure four control position out of a situation in which now I am passing the arm. So whenever I pass the arm, my goal is to bring my partner's elbow across my center line. Okay, if a good disciplined opponent will always have this. Will always have a frame across my hip, and will have his elbow more or less in line with my hip. Okay, if his elbow is drifting outside of my hip, now there is an underhook exposure, and I can start ratcheting up and going into my whole ratcheting game, basically bypassing the whole pinning the arm, right? If an opponent is just very undisciplined, his elbow is drifting out and away from my hips, I could just go feed an underhook through and then just go into my ratcheting movement. If an opponent is disciplined, we'll keep it in line with my hips. The other option is that I can force him to drift his elbow on the inside of my hips. One of the best ways of doing this is to start pinning arms, because very often you will find that he will go and physically try to peel, maybe he tries to peel your hands or grab his own arm, whatever the case might be. Okay, you will find this works very, very well. Especially if you've been playing this pinning game for a while, eventually you will get tired and will need a hand assist to go and physically strip your hands or whatever the case might be. As soon as you notice that his elbow drifts across the center line, you just want to go with your chest and block the arm, okay? As much as possible, you don't want to go from above, because now it's going to be hard, although not impossible, for him to retract the elbow south. If he does that, it just feeds you into an into a underhook. A good opponent will slide south and will regain a frame on your hips. Okay, understand that if he tries to recover going north, then he basically is feeding you one of your favorite control positions. Okay, so if you go from top, okay, yeah, it's going to be easier for him to go south and get that. Okay, as much as possible. Go catch the arm. Yeah, we're going to catch it. Yeah, exactly. You want to emphasize putting your chest on the inside of his arm. So really want to emphasize going a little bit down and kind of pushing up. Okay, because when you dominate the inside of your partner's arm, now when he tries to go south with the arm, it's actually impossible, because my whole body weight with my legs are driving into this. When I go here, up here, you can just go south and recover. Doesn't matter how much pressure I put. When I go here, he has two options. Either he stays there or he circles up. When he circles up, we're back into our whole game. If he stays there, that's when we start getting again into figure four. Okay, you see, we're creating a loop here. So I can physically catch his arm and feed it to mine. And now I can reinforce it with a figure four. If for whatever reason you notice that you just cannot catch the arm, maybe it's just too far away, whatever the case might be, your whole thing is just to get underneath and behind your partner's elbow with your own elbow. What keeps your partner wedged in place is the squeeze of your elbows, not the hands. If I have my hands locked, but my elbows are separated, you can always start creating space and recovering. Even if my hands are unlocked, but my elbows are tight, when it goes to create space, it's very hard, okay? So if I have the arm, if I don't have the arm, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you go and bite with your elbow behind your partner's elbow and you squeeze everything in. And at this point, you can start going, catch the arm, whatever the case might be, okay? Nelson, which we're gonna look at later on. So we got to this position. If my arm drifts out and away, he can recover with his elbow. If my elbow is in tight, when he goes to recover, there's really nothing there. From this position, there are a few things that can happen. I can quite easily take the back, or I can go into other positions, even triangles, arm bar. But for now, let's focus on the back take, which is the single highest percentage submission positions in the sport as far as submission rate goes. You have two main options for a back take here. You have a very classic, what we call a rocking chair back take, which is putting your partner on the side, and now you want to slide your knee basically behind your partner's head and sort of upper shoulders, upper back. Elbows tied in. If the elbow drifts out and away, you start losing everything. Elbows tight, and you really want to shelf your partner's head on your leg, putting your leg behind your partner's back. At this point, my foot is up, and now I start shadowing his back with my foot. What you want to avoid is to have this foot here, because now if he hits the bridge, whatever, you can even injure your own knee. Okay, that's a very dumb injury. It's very easy to avoid. Just shadowing with your shin your partner's back. Now, how do I take my partner's back? There are two ways from here. Number one, I just slide everything up and I bring one butt cheek on the floor and the other one on the floor. And I will always land to the back of the underhook side. Now I can punch a body triangle, two hooks in. I can start trapping the hand, whatever the case might be. Okay? So once again, a different angle. Yeah. So we got here, I slide my knee up, I sit, and now I want to go butt cheek to butt cheek. My back never touches the floor. One of the biggest mistakes, especially at beginner's level, is to start dragging him until your back touches the floor, and now it's much easier for him to start turning into you. Even if you have the figure 4 wrap, an explosive opponent, there's lots of sweat involved, whatever the case might be, it's pretty easy to actually lose the position. Much better method is to sit and now drag him across, and my back never touches the floor. I go basically shoulder to shoulder. I will always land off the underhook side. I can already lock a body triangle. I can already go into my subsequent positions. Okay? So this is option number one. This is a very popular back take. It's been around forever. It's really one of those things that you see, gi, no gi, really been around forever. There's another option which I tend to prefer because it puts more stress on your partner, which is a situation in which from this figure 4 arm wrap, I bring, turn it, yeah, I emphasize separating his elbow further away than he would ever want and bringing his elbow somewhere up here to the floor while my head goes to the floor in that direction. We are in this figure 4 arm wrap. I'm shelving my partner's head with my knee and with my elbow, elbows tied together. We said there is one way of taking my partner's back, which is this rocking chair movement, butt cheek to butt cheek. That's a great one. Another great way of taking my partner's back from here, which I tend to prefer because it puts even more stress on my partner and allows me to keep top position, is a situation in which I'm flaring my elbows and I'm driving my head to the floor off of an angle. So I don't go in that direction. I rather move my head over there. So what I want to do is flare, bring my partner's elbow to the floor while I bring my head to the floor. And that's how I take my partner's back. Now, sometimes my hook will come in, sometimes it won't. It doesn't matter. Obviously, it's better if it comes in, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't. This one will always be in because that's our starting position. I go, 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 drift, drift, drift. Sometimes, especially with people that have very flexible shoulder and lat muscles, you won't be able to bring your bottom hook in. So it will look something like this. And your foot is going to be out. This is not the end of the world. I can just as easily submit from here, especially if I keep drifting his elbow farther away. But most of the times, you will see that people will try to build height with their hips, and that will allow you the space to come in with the hook. Okay, so even if the hook doesn't come in, you will see that very often people will try to build height, and then the hook comes in, and I can start stretching. I really want to emphasize bring my hips lower, really on his lumbar, and really stretch while separating his elbow from his rib cage. At this point, I can go into very, very easy rear naked choke. I kind of want to ride out his attempts to build height. I just keep this wrist. Show. I can keep this wrist and really use this to flare shoulder and elbow. And this makes really high for him to start coming, or really difficult for him to start coming up. And I can drive with my hips into his lumbar. To go into submission, if I can, I just go inside from the back of his ear. I go and I lock. And obviously I lock a figure 4. Probably more reliable because he's going to be defending with his arm. Yeah, probably more reliable is to go from his forehead. So what I want to do is to get a hand on the floor. Turn a bit. A hand on the floor, and I want to lift, inverting my palm. This is what allows me to get underneath my partner's forehead. If you really press his forehead on the floor, it's going to be hard to get in. But as soon as I move my palm, it's going to be pretty easy. And now I literally want to climb through my partner's face, hand by hand. 1, and every time I climb, I lift. 2, 3, until I shoot in. And now I can lock a figure 4 or even a palm to palm. And now that's a rotational finish, retracting my elbow and getting the tap. Obviously, this is probably the single most powerful control position in not just in the sport of jiu-jitsu, but in any combat sport. This is where in MMA you end up seeing knockouts from the floor, because really there's not much he can do apart from very explosive movements that may or may not work. So once more, if I have the wrist, if I can keep the wrist and just go from behind the ear and drive until I go, great. If for whatever reason it doesn't work, he's doing a very good job at protecting the space behind his ear, I can start either with this hand or with the other hand. Eventually I need 2 hands. Understand that there's a very easy trade-off. If I keep my hand on his wrist, I'm going to emphasize control, because now it's maybe almost impossible for him to come up. The best case scenario as far as control goes is obviously with 2 wrists. Now it's really going to be impossible for him to come up, but I don't have a submission available because I can't move my arm. This is a little bit of best of both worlds, in the sense that I have one control arm and one arm that can go in and get the tap. The trade-off now is that I have 2 hands that can start getting in, either from here or from here. But obviously he is a little bit more mobile in the sense that he can start building a little bit of height and potentially cause me a problem. That's why I really want to emphasize moving away from a controlled position, especially if you're going against a very explosive opponent, only when you've made his body soft and really when you notice that you've been cooking him long enough so that now he doesn't have, you kind of took away these explosive movements from him. So as long as he starts freaking out, movement, whatever the case might be, you really want to emphasize control. So two wrist, one wrist, whatever the case might be. As soon as you notice his body becoming much less mobile and much softer, then you can remove and go into submission with both hands, which is obviously much more powerful. So I can go both hands. Usually people will do a very good job protecting the back of the ear, because this is where they know that my submission is going to come from. That's why you plant your palm on the floor, you twist and catch. And at this point you lift and you really emphasize climbing for your partner's face until you can get in, palm to palm, figure four, and then rotational finish. Understand that having my lower body pressuring into his lumbar and bringing his head up makes it very, very hard for him to build height, because his spine is bent. When he goes to build height from here, it's really hard because I'm lifting his chin away from his chest. So once more, the more he moves, the more I want to forego submissions and emphasize control. So two wrists or one wrist. The less he moves, the more I want to emphasize submission threats. So two hands on the floor, and I start either from the back of the ear or probably more reliably, 1, 2, and I start climbing, whatever that might take to go in and get one of probably the single most powerful submission in the game.